I am looking for my sister. Chama, my lover. She get it all. She the wet designer. So give me assurance. Assurance. I give my baby assurance. I give my baby lifetime insurance. Yeah. Assurance.
Hello guys, welcome back again to my YouTube channel. My name is Abiola, and in today's tutorial we're recreating the dress you have on the screen. You've seen the inspiration and you've seen the outcome, and without wasting so much time, let's just get straight into the tutorial of today. Before we get into the tutorial proper, there's something I would like everyone to note. For this dress, your zipper can be at the side or it can be at the back. For me, for this tutorial, I'll be working with the one at the back. Okay, if you want your zipper to be at the side, all you need to do is to draft your front and back pattern without any zipper allowance. And when you're cutting your back pattern, you cut it on fold as well, knowing fully well that your side seam allowance will be able to take in your zipper either at the right side or at the left side, okay, depending on where you want your zipper to be. But for this dress, knowing that it has a ruch at one side, the zipper will have to fall on the side without the ruch. Okay, so guys, I want today's tutorial to be very quick. So I have already drafted my back bodies and my front bodies, and for the back bodies you can see the zipper allowance and they are drafted on fold, the both of them. As you can see, they are drafted on fold. This is important for this particular monostrap dress, okay, especially if you want your zip to be at the back. If you want your zip to be at the side, you might not need to have a zipper allowance. And I used 3x1 neckline for the back pattern. For the neckline, I used 3x3 for the front bodies. Okay, so I'm just explaining the things I did that you might want to know. Okay, the first thing we're going to go ahead to do is to fold in our zipper allowance. So go ahead and fold in your own zipper allowance just the way I'm doing mine. Once you are done folding in your zipper allowance, open the pattern just the same way I did and go ahead to use your pin to hold the pattern in place. I mean, to hold the zipper allowance in place. You can also use paper tape to hold this in place. Do not use sellotape so that when you're opening it up, you do not rip up your pattern. So paper tape or pins are fine. I'm going to label the wrong side of this pattern, and I will also label the wrong side of the front pattern. So what I'm going to do now is to place the wrong side facing the wrong side. These steps are very important. After placing the wrong side facing wrong side, I'll go ahead to pin the shoulders so that they align. I'll pin the shoulders, I'll pin the side. I'll just pin every part of this pattern paper so that they align properly, because we want the mono strap to be equal. The next step is to work on how deep you want your mono strap to be. And if you remember, the neckline I told you guys I worked with in front is 3x3, which implies that we took 3 inches from the top. So I'm going to place that 3 inches on that front neckline. As you can see, 3 inches is what I placed on the front neckline. And the depth of my mono strap is going to be 6 inches. I actually want it to be 6.5, so I'm going to use 6 inches so that by the time I turn it with the facing, it's going to fall at 6.5. So I'm going to go ahead now to mark 6 inches, and I'm going to try and form the curve that I want my mono strap to be. You saw mine. If you don't want yours to be as deep as that, you can use 5.5, you can use 5. So I'm going to try and form the curve how I want it to be. This depends on you. Remember not to go too low at the armhole area so that your bust does not show. If you can even raise it higher than I'm doing at the moment, do that so that your bust does not show when you put on your monostrap dress. Also remember that the shape that this your monostrap gets to have depends on what you want. It could just follow a straight line or a straight curve, but this is just my preference. I decided to put this out there so you're not wondering why are you giving it this shape. It's just my personal preference. Now I'm going to go ahead to cut out. When I was drafting this pattern, I didn't add any allowance for my dart. That is why I wrote add 1 inch at the waist area. So once I'm cutting out on fabric, I'm going to add extra 1 inch at the waist area for my dart. Looking at the shape our zipper area has, you can see the essence of, you know, folding in the zipper the way we did. Now we're going to get rid of zipper bulge. What we're going to do is to take 1/2 inch at the waistline. Remember, our zipper allowance is 1 inch. So after taking 1/2 inch at the waistline to get rid of zipper bulge, we're going to connect to the top part. Then proceed to cut out as shown. Okay, now you can see the importance of folding in the zipper allowance when we did. You see that once you join your zipper allowance, everything is going to be seamless. Okay, now we're going to proceed to cut on fabric, and I'm going to add the 1 inch like I said at the waistline. I'm going to cut off camera and show you what I mean. And here's what I have after cutting. Like I told you guys, I would not be adding any allowance at the neckline because I want it to fall at 6.5. But if you do not want that, you could add. Also, as you can see, I added my 1 inch seam allowance at the sides for my dart. I added at the front bodies and at the back as well. So that's it basically. Now let's cut out the skirt part. The amount of fabric you need when your skirt part is placed on fold should be equal to your hip measurement or your hip circumference divided by 4 plus your allowance. So my hip circumference is 41.5. 41.5 divided by 4 gives me 10.37. I think that's approximately 10.4. So if I add 1 inch seam allowance, what I'll be having is 11.4. So as you can see, I went ahead to cut out 12 inches on fold. And as for the length of the skirt part, it depends on how long you want your dress to be. For me, the length of my skirt part is about 39.5 inches including the allowance. So that's what I have there. We're still going to take all the measurement. Okay, then this is the back part of the skirt. You know, the back part is going to contain the zipper allowance, and for the back part I'm going to be adding 1.5 inch to the 12 inches that we'll have in front, and that gives 13.5. As you can see, this will be enough to cut the back part as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is to go ahead to mark my 1.5 inch at the back. That's not our full zipper allowance, but that's what we need to mark. I'm going to explain everything in detail. Okay, so I'm going to mark 1.5 from beginning to the end because that's what we need for to cut out the zip area. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead to place the front skirt part on the back skirt part, but the front skirt part is going to stop at the zipper area. As you can see, I'm carefully placing it on the line I have already drawn. Okay, then the next thing I'll do is to cut off this top part because it frays easily and I don't want to include that in my skirt. Okay, the next step is to mark my hip point. My hip point is 10 inches. That's your waist to the widest part of your hip. I went ahead to mark 10 inches, which is wrong. I was supposed to add 0.5 inch allowance because we need an allowance at the waistline to connect the skirt to the bodice. So I corrected that and I later went ahead to mark 10.5. So this is me explaining why you have two lines at this point. Just for proper understanding, the 0.5 inch I added is the allowance I would need to join my skirt to the bodice. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Yeah, the next step is to mark the length of the skirt part. The length of the skirt part of this dress is 37.5 inches, and I'll proceed to add 1 inch allowance, and I'll mark 38.5. The 1 inch allowance is what I'm going to use to hem the base of the dress. So I'm going to go ahead to connect the line into a straight line. This is not new to you if you've been watching my tutorials. On the waistline, I'm going to divide my waist circumference, which is 29.5 by 4, and that gives me 7.4. After marking that 7.4, I'm going to add extra 1 inch for my dart and an extra inch for my seam allowance. Okay, so extra 1 inch for that and extra 1 inch for seam allowance. On the hip line, my hip circumference is 41.5. 41.5 divided by 4 is 10.4, so that's what I marked. Then I will go ahead to add extra 1 inch for seam allowance, and I will connect the lines. At the skirt length area, I'm going to mark exactly what I have on my hip line, and what I have on my hip line is about 11.4. I'm going to measure that. What I have there is 11.4. I'll mark the same thing on the hip line. Note that at this point we're not making the down part pencil, because this is going to have a slit, so there's no need to make it pencil, in case you're wondering why we are not using the usual pencil skirt method. So on the allowance line and on the skirt length line, I marked the 10.4. Then I also marked it at the midpoint just to get a straight line, because at this point I could not find my long ruler. So I'll just go ahead now to connect the point into a straight line. If you remember, on the bodice we took out ½ inch from the waistline, at the zipper allowance, just to get rid of zipper bulge. So to ensure that everything aligns, we're going to mark ½ inch at the waistline for the skirt part as well. At the hip line, we're going to mark 1.5. remember, our zipper allowance is 1 inch, and that 1 inch plus 0.5 inch for the bum, that's what I marked. That is why I marked 1.5 inch on the hip line. Then I'll proceed to connect the points. From the hip line, I'm going to come down by 5 inches, and I'm going to draw that into a straight line as well, and I'm going to mark 1 inch at that point. Okay, then I'll proceed to connect the point using my curved ruler. Then at the skirt length area, I'm also going to go ahead to mark 1 inch. Due to the fact that I do not have a long ruler, that's why I marked that 1 inch again at that point, just to enable me get a straight line. Okay, so if you don't have a very long ruler as well, you can do the same to get your straight line. At this point, I'm going to proceed to cut out. As usual, it is left with one step on our front skirt pattern. I'm going to go down from the waistline by 0.5 inch, and this is just to get rid of the excess fabric that is always found there and to give it extra fit, like I always say. So I'm going to go down from that point by 0.5 inch and connect to the side seam, then cut out. At this point, go ahead to mark your dart at the skirt part and at the bodice part, okay? Then the next step now is to cut out a facing for the bodice. The facing is what we're going to use to turn the neckline as well as the armholes. Go ahead to determine how wide you want your facing to be. For me, I want mine to be 2 inches wide. So what I'm going to do now is to mark 2 inches at this side and mark 2 inches at the other side and connect them to form a straight line, or just cut in a straight line. And as you can see, it looks really straight. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the back pattern as well. I'll cut it out and also make it 2 inches wide like the front pattern. I'll also go ahead to do the same thing for the last piece of fabric, which is the other part of the back pattern. I would also make it 2 inches wide and I'll cut out. Now it's time to sew. What we're going to do first is to stitch the neckline using 0.5 inch seam allowance. Also top stitch the neckline, then stitch the armhole using 0.5 inch allowance. Do not forget to hem the base of the facing so that when we use our hemming gum to join it to the front part, so it forms one piece, it looks neat. Do the same thing for the remaining part of the dress. Stitch the neckline, stitch the armhole using 0.5 inch allowance. Also go ahead to take in your dart on the skirt and on the top part, and here is what I have when I was done taking in my dart on the skirt part. Okay, I've also gone ahead to take in my dart on the top part. Okay, and here is what it looks like. We're still going to iron this and also use hemming gum to hold them down, but not yet. Before ironing, go ahead to trim off excess allowance and notch so that when you iron, everything is going to relax properly. Okay, now it is time to iron the bodies, both the front and the back part. Iron everything properly. Okay, then we're going to join the shoulders next. Please pay rapt attention at this point. Place the front part and the back part right sides facing each other, just the way you see me doing. Then put your hand inside the back bodice, just the way you see me doing, and bring in the front bodice, just the way you see me doing. Okay, and cover the front bodice using this back bodice, just like this. Okay, proceed to arrange the shoulders properly. Arrange and pin. okay, and head over to your sewing machine to stitch using 0.5 inch seam allowance. Before you head over to your sewing machine, go ahead to pin the bodies with the skirt parts, ensuring that the darts align. You don't want to be that person that sews and the darts are not aligning. Go ahead to pin the darts together to ensure that it aligns. Do the same thing for the back bodies as well, and stitch them using 0.5 inch seam allowance that we added. Okay, same thing, this is the other part of the back bodies. Go ahead and also stitch that using 0.5 inch seam allowance. Can you see how this looks? Can you see how lovely my shoulder is looking? But guys, one thing to ensure that the shoulder relaxes, I've already gone ahead to cut off my excess allowance, but make sure you trim off every excess allowance, especially the ones found at the edge. Then also proceed to notch just like you see me doing. And here, this is the point where we're going to use our hemming gum to iron this part very well and also hold down the facing. Okay, so now I'm going to just use the front part as an example for you guys to understand. So pass in your hemming gum the way you see me doing, put it inward and also drag it out, then iron every angle, the armhole area as well as the neckline. After doing that, do not forget to also join your facing to the bodies or to the top part by placing your hemming gum underneath it and ironing it so that they become one piece. Do not forget to do the same thing for the back pattern as well. And once you're done with that, the next thing is to place the back pattern right sides facing each other. Okay, and go ahead to mark out your zipper allowance, which is 1 inch. So mark 1 inch from beginning to the end. After marking that, go ahead to pin down that zipper allowance area, especially the waistline. Ensure that the waistline area matches properly, because you wouldn't want a situation where after fixing your zipper the waistline is not aligning. Okay, so make sure you pin down just like I'm showing you at the moment. Check it out and be sure that it aligns. Then head over to your sewing machine to stitch from beginning to the end. And I'm done stitching. Here is what I have. Now I'm going to go ahead to open up the seam of that area and iron. I like to do that before I fix my zipper. So after doing that, I'll go ahead to loosen the zipper allowance area to where I want my zipper to stop. My zipper is going to stop about 10 inches from the waistline, 10 to 10.5 inches from my waistline. So I've gone ahead to fix my zipper, and right now I'm pinning the side seam. I'm also ensuring that they align. I'm pinning everything from beginning to the end. After pinning the other side as well, I'll head over to my sewing machine and stitch using the 1 inch seam allowance I added. So I'll stitch with 1 inch seam allowance on one side and stitch with 1 inch on the other side. And here is what I have. Our dress is coming together. At this point, you go ahead to try on your dress. Guys, when I tried it on, I just wanted to stop the tutorial here and just keep wearing the dress because it was so pretty. But I need to finish the tutorial. So after wearing the dress, note where you want your slit to start. So after wearing mine, this place I'm marking now because I already marked it whilst wearing the dress, but I'm trying to make it more visible for you guys. So that's where I want my slit to stop. So at that point where you want your slit to stop, loosen it to that point. I'm going to just tell you what it measures. That's about 23 inches. Okay, so loosen it, and now let's finish up. So I've gone ahead to loosen mine to that point. Don't forget to back stitch at that point so that it doesn't loosen, your slit doesn't start to loosen. Okay, open up your zipper. Once anything you're stitching at this point, make sure your zipper is open because you are stitching just one side. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. Open the seams. Go ahead to stitch using 0.5 inch allowance that would size your rope that you're going to pass through that place. Stitch from the waistline to the end of the slit or to the end of the dress. Remember, you are only stitching the slit, so do not make mistake of stitching the dress together. Now here's the rope we'll be working with. It's about 1.5 inches wide and 33 inches long. Okay, that's what I'm going to be working with. What I'm going to do is to fold that into two and stitch using 0.25 seam allowance from beginning to the end. I have two ropes, same width and length, so I'm going to do the same thing to the other rope as well. And here's what I have, guys. And because I don't have a strap turner, I don't know what it's called, I'm going to be using broomsticks to flip it to the right side. So go ahead and flip yours to the right side and then proceed to iron it flat. This rope is going to come out at some point along the slit. So what we're going to do is to loosen a little bit towards the end of that slit, or exactly at the end of the slit, just losing about 0.5 inch of the thread to allow the rope come out. I hope that makes sense, because the rope is going to come out at that point. So losing 0.5 inch on both sides, and do not forget to back stitch so that that does not loosen as well. So now I'm going to go ahead to fasten the rope. Remember, the rope, one end should be closed. Okay, so you can fasten the rope from underneath or from the waistline. So the first one, I passed it from underneath, just the way you see me doing, using my safety pins. It might get a bit annoying when you're trying to bring it out at the waistline, but just try your best to bring it out. But if you do not like that method, pass it from the waistline, it's easier. But when you're passing it from the waistline, remember that you have to pass the closed edge through, because that's what is going to be showing at the bottom. Okay, that's exactly what I'm doing now. I'm passing from the waist area down. So just use any of the methods that's best for you. Okay, the second to the last step in the making of this dress is to top stitch where the rope is at, so that when you drag your ruch, the rope does not come out. So stitch it down properly. The last step is hemming the base of the dress using the allowance added. And with that, we've come to the end of this tutorial. Endeavor to hit the subscribe button, like this video if you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in my next tutorial. Bye.